Welcome all for today's database management system session number 8 of second semester BCA affiliated to Kuvempu University. So the topics which we are going to cover today is database system structure. So before moving on to today's topic, understanding the structure of a database system, so let us have a recap of our online session number 7. So dear students, I think you all remember in our previous session we have understood the concept of database users and the administrators along with the roles played by the DBA designers and different types of end users. So with this short recap of our previous class, let on move to the today's online session. So the learning objective of today's online session is to understand the database system structure, which is very important thing. So the session outcomes of today's session is the student will be able to understand how actually the database system is being designed or how internally the database structure is going to run. So dear students, let us start learning about the database system architecture. So before going you theoretically what this database structure look like, let me show you a diagram which is depicting the components or the modules of our DBMS and the interaction which is going in our entire database management system. So dear students, in this presentation you can see there is a simple diagram which is telling in brief the different component modules of our DBMS and their interaction. So let us start learning this. So to this particular diagram, it is self-explanatory. When you can see from the top, you are being described with the different types of users of your database management system. So in the previous session, we have learned the different database users, isn't it? So you can see here, you have 4 different categories of users here in the architecture. That is, one is the DBA, that is a database administrator staff, the end users, that is your casual users, the application programmers and the parametric users there. So these are the main important users of our system there. Along with that, the different users, even what we have learned, they also become the part of your DBMS system there. See, the task of a DBA, you already know what is supposed to do there. So this DBA staff guys, they will be working with the different DDL statements, that your data definition language statements along with the privilege commands there. For executing the DDL statements, you can find out that you have your DDL compiler here. I think you can see this. You have your DDL compiler, so which is moving on to the system catalog or the data dictionary. Okay, dear students, remember in our entire architecture we have something called as a system catalog or a data dictionary. So it is the place where we are going to refer the data which is been stored there. Also the DBA staff, it works with your privilege commands there. I think you remember what do we know about a privilege commands there. And next to the DBA staff, after this we have your casual users who perform the interactive query processing system. So for doing that one, we use the query compiler, and even to work effective with the query execution, we have your query optimizer there. Next, the application programmers, they are the people who are going to write the application programs for our entire DBMS there. So for that, executing the application program as written by your application programmers, we need some compilers. Among them, we use 2 things. One is your pre-compiler, which is going to perform the initial task of execution of our programs there, and which is going to work with your DML compilers there. If you have left with some of the instructions being executed or compiled, we are using some host language compilers there. So totally all the transactions will get compiled, and all the compiled transactions will be used by parametric users there. Now you understood the different users and how they are going to work in the architecture there. But whatever we are going to do in our DBMS system there, it needs to be stored, isn't it? So we have already learned that any data which is going to be stored, it will be stored in your magnetic disk or your secondary storages there. So for that we have a stored databases there. And even we have the runtime database processor, which are going to help you in executing all the commands, all the queries and all your transactions which is happening in your DBMS interaction there. So for doing all those things, that is interacting with your store databases, with your runtime database processor, you have a manager called as store database manager. So this store database manager, it performs lot of activities. Among them, this DBMS architecture, it holds lot of facilities also. So I will refer what all those things are called as. So among them, the first one is it provides a concurrency control. See, when you are working with multiple transactions to be executed at a single point of time, you need something to be executed with smooth there or with some synchronization. For that, we use concurrency control managers there. Along with that, even the data what you are working with, they need to be duplicated or replicated in some of the situation. For that, we follow some backup procedures there. Also, there are chances of having some software or a hardware failures also, isn't it? So to overcome these hardware and software failures, we have a system called as recovery subsystems there. So these all things will be taken care by your stored managers. So all the interaction between your stored databases, runtime database processes will be done by using the various input as well as the output statements from the databases there. So the entire thing is been illustrated one by one in the slide there. So I think you got an insight about how this DBMS system structure or environment is been designed there. Now in brief, let us understand the diagram. So to start up, I said that the database as well as the DBMS catalogs, they are normally stored on the disk there. You have to remember this term there, that is called as a catalog, which is going to be work as a reference for our further transactions in the architecture there. So the next important person who is going to perform all the operations in your DBMS is the stored data manager. He is responsible for multiple things there. Among them, it controls accesses to your all the DBMS information that is stored in your disk, whether it's a part of your database or it's a part of your catalog there. So any interaction between your database and the user, or the catalog and the user, or in between them, will be taken care by the stored database manager, which is in turn a module of our DBMS there. So remember these two things there, the stored data manager, what is supposed to do and where it is going to be stored. So now let us have an insight about who are the various users who will be using our database structure there. So already you're familiar with them. So to start up, we'll speak about a DBA staff there. So the DBA staff and casual users work with interactive interfaces to formulate the queries there. You have seen in the diagram. And you have your application programmers who write the program using the host languages there. And you have your parametric users. These parametric users make data entry to the database through your predefined forms there. So the DBA staff works on defining the database and tuning it using the various data definition language, that is your DDL, and through other privilege commands which we have seen in the diagram there. The DDL compiler, it processes, what does it does? See, this DDL compiler, it will processes the schema definitions. So specified in all your DDL there. And it stores the description of the schema in the DBMS catalog. So this is the task which has been done by your DDL compilers there. Next, once this is done, the queries will be passed. That is, it will be converted into an intermediate form, and it is analyzed for the correctness of the operations and the names of the data elements by the query compiler that compilers them into an internal form. This internal query is subjected to your query optimization by your query optimization tool. I said when I am speaking about your store data manager, one of the tasks being done is your query optimization. So this internal query will be subjected to your query optimization so that the database interaction or the transaction takes place smoothly. So now we have the pre-compilers. See, this pre-compiler, what they are going to do is they are going to extract all the DML commands, whether it may be manipulation, it refers to update command or an alter command, anything it may be. So from an application programmer, and they will be sent to the DML compiler for the upcoming compilation process. So next, rest of the program is sent to the host language compiler, which is going to perform the remaining execution there. Then the object codes for all the DML commands and the rest of the programs are supposed to be linked. So forming a canned transaction whose executable codes includes the calls to the runtime database processors. Then we have our parametric users there. See, these parametric users supplies the parameters to these canned transactions which we are getting from the previous step. So directly, so that they can run the transactions repeatedly. So now the runtime database processor will execute three important things. One is it is going to execute all the privilege commands which are coming from your DBA staff. You remember that one? And similarly, it is going to also execute all the executable query plans. Along with that, all the canned transactions with runtime parameters. So this is how the database, runtime database processor is going to execute that. So it works with the system dictionary. You have to remember this another term. This is called as a system dictionary. So which you will be learning in the next units there. See, the store data manager, which in turn uses the basics operating system services for querying out all the low level input output operation between disk and the memory. So for performing your input operation, we use different operating system routines. For if you are working with your C programming, you can use an input, how you are going to use your printf and scanf. In the same way, they are going to use all the low level input and output operation for having the data being transferred between the disk and the memory. So it also handles some aspects of management of buffers in your main memory. Some DBMS have their own buffer management techniques also. In your RDBMS, I think you have all your buffer management techniques being installed. Then we have spoken about your concurrency control, isn't it? See, this concurrency control, backup and recover manager are integrated into the working of the runtime database processor for the purpose of transaction management. So thereby you can confirm that whatever the transaction the DBMS is going to do, it will be done effectively and it will be done without any chaos there. So this is the entire diagram which is going to depict the structure of your database management system. So this figure, it illustrates what the component modules of your DBMS and their interaction. So I think now if you see the diagram, you can easily refer how it is going to work. At the top we have what? Yes, you can find out that we have what? Database DBA staff guys, the casual users, application programmers and the parametric users. And each are playing their own specified roles there. So we have already learned that this DBA staff, it is going to work with your DDL statements as well as your privilege commands there. For executing all the DDL statements, we are using what? Yes, DDL compilers there. So which is going to refer your system catalog or your data dictionaries. So the casual users, they are going to have your interactive query execution by using the query compiler. And even for the task of smooth execution, they are going to use what? Query optimizers. In the same way, the application programmers build their own applications and they are being given for execution to your pre-compilers, which in turn uses your DML compilers, and the rest of your commands will be executed by your host language compilers, which will be in turn given to your compile transaction. And the parameters which are really needed for executing all the transactions will be provided by whom? Yes, they are provided by the fourth type of user, that is your parametric users, and the entire things, that is your DBA commands, queries and transaction execution will be handled by what? The runtime database processor. And everything is taken care by the access is taken care by what? Yes, it is nothing but your stored data manager. So performing the interaction between the user as well as your manager, we use what? All the low level input output operations will be performed from your databases there. So in turn, for having your transaction being executed completely, what are the techniques we are going to have here? Yes, for the execution of the canned transactions in any anomaly, we have your concurrency control, we have your backup, we have your recovery subsystems. So finally, this is how the entire architecture or the environment of your database management system. So I think, dear students, you all got an insight about how a database management system structure is been designed, or how the entire execution environment is been designed with all the components what we have illustrated in this particular figure. So now we'll end up with your session summary. The student here is able to understand the entire database system structure, its flow, its different users, what do you mean by stored manager, what is the role they are going to perform, how the flow is been happening there. So for further references, students, you can refer to the book titled Fundamentals of Database System, authored by Elmasri and Nawate, and it is the 5th edition by your AW publication. Also, you can refer to the book authored by Korth and Sudarshan, titled Database System Concepts, published by McGraw-Hill, its 4th edition.